Today is all about veterans. Of course, with Veterans Day being this week, this is a really, really important topic. I think there's a huge opportunity out there for a lot of you shops that are listening. And in a lot of ways, being able to communicate and understand and really have really good relationships with those veterans in our shop. So, title of today's session is Attracting Veterans and Setting Them Up for Success at Your Shop. We've got three really, really good guests that are joining us today as panelists. Scott Jenkins, Roger Gutierrez, and Jim Toussaint, and we'll bring them on in just a second. But before we get to them, a couple notes here. You can see that your microphones are muted. In the chat, introduce yourself and let the other attendees and panelists know where you're listening from. I had mentioned that already. And then lastly, we will be sending a recording of this to everybody that registered. A few housekeeping notes. If you'd like to talk with the other attendees, and we highly encourage that, a lot of what we talk about is to generate ideas and get best practices out there for really everybody to understand and hopefully bring back to their shops and really hopefully have an impact in their shop. So use that chat back and forth with one another. Let's get those best practices out there and really be able to learn something today. If you do have a question for myself or for any of the presenters or the panelists, please use the Q&A section. A lot of times the chat gets going wild and it's hard to keep up with. The Q&A kind of helps keep that front of mind for us so we can get to those questions. And again, these are being recorded and will be sent out to all registrants after the event. Quick plug for Wrenchway. For those of you that don't know who we are, our mission is to promote and improve technician careers, maybe moving away from viewing finding technicians as a transactional type of activity, but more of building a pipeline of people that know who you are. And we feel like making your shop better in any aspect is really impactful to being able to get those technicians in the door for you. So ultimately, we want these technicians going out and working for really good shops. Joining us for something like this today really helps with that. We do offer a number of different solutions, probably the most popular being our Top Shops pages themselves. A lot of you have seen those, but we've got reverse job posting, almost like a dating app for a technician. We've got Shop Talk, which really has taken off here lately with content from shops talking about who they are and really being able to paint a picture for that technician that's out there looking about who you really are. We work closely with schools on both the top schools for the post-secondary side and School Connect. But any of this, you can go out to wrenchway.com and learn more, or reach out to us, and we'll certainly try to get you some more information. And with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen and ask our panelists to turn their cameras and microphones on. All right, we got two of them. We're waiting on Jim. There's Jim. It looks like we've got the chat's going crazy, people from all over the place. It's really cool to see the different areas of the country that people join us from. So thank you to all of the attendees for joining us today. Let's introduce the panelists. Let's start with Roger. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm out of the Biggers Auto Group, out of Elgin, Illinois. We have a Chevy store and a Mazda store. Been in the business since early 2000s. Moved up in the fixed ops department, and now I am the fixed operations manager for the group.
All right, thank you. Scott, a little bit about you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Scott Jenkins. I'm the regional fixed operations director for Asbury Automotive. Basically, I have all the stores from Daytona to Georgia. I am a veteran. I was in submarine service for 10 years, and I've been in the car business now for 28.
And bracing for some weather down there?
Yeah, it looks like we're going to get a little bit.
All right. Well, hopefully all of our friends in Florida stay safe. Jim, I see you're on mute, but if you could maybe turn yourself off mute, and we'd love to learn a little bit about you. There you go.
Okay. I'm Jim Toussaint. I'm Division Operations Manager of Worldwide Equipment in Knoxville, Tennessee. We are a Mack, Volvo, Kenworth, and international heavy truck dealership with 29 locations in 7 states. I oversee the parts, service, and body shop operations at 4 of our locations. I also handle a handful of large fleet accounts on the truck sales side. I am also a veteran of the United States Marine Corps, and I was a truck technician and heavy truck and tractor trailer operator while I was in.
I think this is the really cool part, and I talk about this in almost every roundtable. Is one, we've got some really great industry experts joining us today to talk about this, but two, you'll notice that it's a variety of different backgrounds, right? Maybe not one branch of the military or even the same sector within our industry, right? We've got trucking, we've got automotive, we've got, those of you that are out there, I see some equipment. I think that is really cool because a lot of these best practices apply to all of us, right? And whether you're that gigantic dealership or that small independent shop or somewhere in between, I think a lot of what we're going to talk about today is really, really impactful to all of you. So one of the really cool parts about this, something that I don't know, I just really, really enjoy is getting to see the different backgrounds. So let's get into the meat of things here. Let's talk about veterans. And I want to start by kind of understanding a little bit of why we should be recruiting folks from the military. I think it can be somewhat of a rhetorical question, but I also think there's a lot of value in hearing from you guys as to, what value those veterans bring to you. So Jim, I'm going to start with you and talk to me a little bit about why we should be looking for veterans to as employees in our shops.
Well, I think nothing's 100%. But I think when you're hiring veterans, no matter what branch of the service they're coming from, they've got the skills and abilities that a lot of employers are looking for. They've got a certain amount of bearing. They're generally successful people. If you've served a hitch in whatever branch of the service you have, you're generally pretty successful in that. You're a go-getter. You want to do a good job. You enjoy being part of a team, and you just have a lot of skills and abilities that all employers are looking for today.
Yeah, I think so many shops that we talk to are looking for that dependability. They're looking for those folks that can really ease our minds when we come into work in the morning, that those folks are going to show up and actually work on the stuff in the shop. So I think you hit on a lot of really good points there. Scott, do you have anything to add to what Jim's saying there?
Well, you're definitely going to have an employee with integrity, which is extremely important. The trust factor of them doing a good job and doing the right thing when nobody's looking. They work very well as a team, as Jim was saying. When you get out, it's a very the time is uneasy for a veteran when they get out, because a lot of things were done for them. And they really didn't have to think so much that they would have to do in the civilian world.
Well, and I think that's a real challenge, right? And that's something, as we talk about this, that I think is so important to understand, is that in many cases there's a transition period, right? It's not like they're just walking into a shop like a normal civilian. They've probably seen some stuff, or they've got some different experiences that maybe the typical person wouldn't have. And Roger, in your experience, have you seen it, ways that maybe you can help that transition and helping that vet get comfortable in the shop?
Yeah, adding the flexibility that they might need to take care of things that they did not account for when they're making that transition. Needing to go inspect an apartment or a house, or needing a help with the moving truck while they transport their things, to their new place of where they're living. These are all things that have popped up when we've hired, veterans, things like that, that we were more than happy to help out with when we could.
Do you think that's changed with veterans, where maybe I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, maybe we weren't taking it as seriously. Some of the mental health and not even mental health, but just the general transition, like you said, getting somebody some tools. I think, at least from my experience, it feels like we take it a little bit more serious now, don't we, Roger?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it's something that, everybody out here can tell you that, it's an asset to have someone who's been in the service. I mean, not to mention that they're incredibly coachable and they're used to being coached and, being led to the point where it's what we're all looking for as managers and leaders ourselves, people that can do that. So it's important that we give our part by allowing for that flexibility, allowing for that, the mental health aspect of it to be helpful.
Jim, do you think that some level of this is providing that structure up front, so when they come in they have some of that structure? I think in past content that I've done, I've admitted my failures in dealing or managing and trying to lead veterans, because maybe I didn't have as much structure as they needed. I think, is there some level of having that structure gives them some comfort when they're coming in your doors?
I would absolutely think so. They're used to working as a team, but they also want to understand what's my career path. Whether you're officer enlisted, warrant officer ranks, there's an understanding there of where you progress in your career and the jobs that you'll hold when you get to those positions. So I think that for somebody coming in out of the service, that they want to understand, hey, how do I fit into the team? How do I succeed with the team? What's my career path look like? What are my career options look like if I come to work for you? So I think having that structure and also for them to understand that they're how are we as an employer going to help them assimilate into our company.
Now, in our pre-show meeting here, we had talked about tools, right? And you talk about, once you're bringing them into the fold, there's cases where these vets don't have any tools, right? The tools were provided for them by whatever military branch they were in. How much of a factor, and Jim, I'll go right back to you on this one. How much of a factor does that play into in terms of getting them comfortable? They're coming into a new work environment, maybe at a disadvantage in terms of not having tooling. Is that something that maybe we can help out with a little bit?
Absolutely. I mean, we have a program for a new employee that's coming on board, where we will actually purchase the tools for them up to about $2,500, and it's really a starter set. We've all, most big truck dealership operations, they've got the major tools, the 1-inch guns, the clutch jacks, all that kind of thing. So we provide them with a pretty sound set of starter tools and a box. And then if they stay with us for 24 months successfully, at the end of that 24 months, the tools belong to them. And so it's a good program, and it certainly helps a young man or woman coming into our industry that does need tools, and they don't have to make that initial out-of-pocket investment, which they may not be able to make.
Scott, do you, as far as the tooling side of bringing a technician on, anything that you see there at Asbury?
Yeah, we help them with tools as well. We generally, it depends what department, but we do help them with tools as well.
And how do you communicate that? Like, so if you're out and you're trying to find that technician that's got that recent veteran that's kind of transitioning into civilian life, and maybe they don't quite understand that side of it, or they know that that's a barrier to entry, how do you communicate that with them?
Well, you have to also understand what we're up against with recruiting them. Right now, out of high school, they're giving these young people $40,000 signing bonuses to come in. That's the Army. Now the Navy is doing up to $115,000 signing bonus, $65,000 $100,000 of that would be tuition reimbursement. For example, if they went to school for a few years, then they can get that back. And they're also the people that get out, in order for them to retain them, depending on what programs you're in. If you're in a nuclear program or in a job that's not manned as sufficient as the Department of Defense wants, then they're paying some of these service members up to $200,000 to stay in.
Mm.
So, you know, there's just so much up against. Now, then when you get out, your mindset is that you're going to have more freedom, right? I don't know if Jim felt the same way when he was in, but you know, you're not in. You can do what you want with your life at that point. In the military, you can't quit. You know, you can't leave. If you leave, if you walk off the job, they put you in prison. So there's so much, you know, that we can do. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that we tend to make in the industry is we want to start them out as an entry level type technician, where if you have a guy or a young lady who has worked 4 or 5 years on vehicles and rebuilt diesel engines, then we need to consider them as such, as almost as an employee that worked down the street 5 years at a dealership. And we tend to offer them an entry-level position and put them in quickly, which after they've had all of this training and working under pressure, you know, that's not really appealing to them at that point. They've worked really hard, they've sacrificed, and they don't deserve to go into a $15 an hour or less quick lube position, and then maybe down the road, you know, get a chance to get into the main shop. You know, my advice would be, you know, when you bring them on, tell them that they will be with a more advanced mentor, because you are going to have to see what you have there to see what kind of talent level you have with the technician. But I wouldn't start him off in the expressway.
How do you, and this is coming from a civilian trying to manage or lead military vets, how does that experience translate? So say they're in the service and they're working as a mechanic. How does that translate? How does that fit what we're doing on a daily basis?
So, you know, fixing cars and fixing machinery really is about the same. You know, there's timelines for getting these vehicles back. You know, sometimes these vehicles will break down out in the middle of nowhere in a foreign country, and you're in a conflict, and you got to go out there and get it running and get it back. It's a different type of world, but the skills translate. You know, their schooling is very intense. You know, and when I go to some of these, I won't name them, but I go to some of these technical schools that I've been to throughout my career out in the area or wherever I used to live. I see a lot of guys on their cell phones, you know, not really paying a whole lot of attention, not, you know, looking the part, if you will, like Jim was saying, good bearing, you know, just keeping yourself presentable. You know, I think the skills translate tremendously.
And Roger, do you have anything to add there in terms of the skills translation from the military to a dealership setting?
Oh, absolutely. You know, being being in the military, you've seen people that come out of there just with a different kind of mindset and gumption, like Scott was saying, that you can't really teach. You can't put them in front of a computer and go through a training course that's going to allow them the patience they need to figure out a problem. The direction they need to for themselves to get through a tough situation. You can't teach them. It's something everybody has to go through. And when, like he was saying, we go to these vocational schools, everybody is, sunshine and rainbows. But when someone's been through what some of these people have been through, the mindset's more centered, they're more grounded, and it's a lot easier for them to get through these challenges, than it would be someone who's completely green, who has a certificate that says they know everything about the vehicle we're working on or the equipment that we're working on, but they don't have the life experience and work experience that we would get from a veteran.
Well, and I think the ability to think on your feet a little bit too, right? I know I've had conversations with some veterans where, maybe they had a lineup of Humvees that they had to get rolling like that, right? And in order to get one running, you had to steal a starter from another or do something to get it rolling, and do really whatever it took just to get it rolling, because Scott had mentioned the tight timelines. That happens in the military, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Jim,
Jim could probably speak to that too, because I mean, he was that type of technician.
Yeah, Jim, let me ask you that. You give us your background in the military. You actually already did, but how that translated for you as somebody that had been a mechanic and then translated to civilian life in kind of the same capacity. What was your experience?
I think that, if you're mechanically inclined and you can work on bulldozers, you can work on trucks, you can work on nearly anything. For me, when I got out of the Marine Corps, I went to work for a large excavating company and, did pretty much anything, drove trucks, ran the lowboy, ran equipment, worked in the shop, plowed snow, whatever they need me to do. And so, I think a lot of it comes back to the individual. And if they want to learn, they want to get better, they want to excel. I think that anybody is willing to take a chance on that person.
Yeah, and we've got a good question that I'm going to add on here that I see that came through the chat. And this one's an interesting question because I don't know if we can speak directly to mower equipment, but Felipe asked, how do you translate the transition from aviation to mower equipment? And I'm guessing, and he said in terms of salary, and I don't know if we use it that specific, but one thing that Scott had mentioned was how do you treat that in terms of salary when you're bringing that vet in for an interview, and you don't want to start them at the lube tech level, but you also don't want to start them off so high that you find out in 30 days that maybe they're not exactly what you're needing there. It puts you in kind of a weird position, doesn't it, Roger?
It can, but it's all depending on your dealership scale or shop scale, where they're at. The way we do it is kind of years of service, kind of put them in where we would put if they were at our store for that amount of time, kind of where they would be at, and then we have like a 30-day kind of apprenticeship shadowing program where they don't need any tools, they don't need anything like that. They're just going to be working with an experienced technician. And then you have a meeting as a manager with a technician that's already been at your shop and kind of gauge, where they're at after those 30 days.
Jim, do you do anything similar to that? Like basically take what their experience is in the military and apply it to how you're going to position them once you bring them on the team?
Usually what we'll do is if we're going to interview somebody like that, I'll interview them, my service manager, a couple of our shop foremen, and a lot of the questions will be around, tell me what you did. Tell me what you worked on. Tell me the kind of jobs that you were doing. And through that kind of a question and answer session, you can kind of get an idea of the type of the work that person has done, the scope of the work, the complexity of the work, those kind of things. And so then you can kind of get an idea where that person fits in your organization. Most dealerships or fleets or whatever will have a designation a class 1 mechanic or a class A mechanic or what, or in B, C, D, whatever like that. So by a lot of that questioning, you can kind of get a handle on where that person's skill set is. And then to Scott's point, you don't want to bring that guy in as a D-level technician when that guy is doing what we used to refer to in the military as third, fourth, maybe even fifth echelon type work. So by asking the questions, and it'd be the same questions you'd ask a guy off the street, you can get a handle on where that individual's skill set is. And then after that, it's really kind of monitoring his workloads and the things he's accomplished during your first 90, 120 days. And we have had situations where we've moved somebody up. We've had situations where we had to have a conversation and said, hey, look, I know you said you were a B, but you're really not. You're more of a C. And most of the time what we find is they actually have better skills than we'd anticipated.
Interesting. And clarify for me, and when you said third, fourth, or fifth echelon, what does that mean?
When I was in the Marine Corps, like fourth and fifth echelon work is pulling engines, pulling transmissions, rear end work, those kind of things. Third echelon is what we would refer to as fleet type work, brakes, tires, batteries, air conditioning, those kind of things. And I don't know what the other branches call that, but when I was in the Marine Corps, we went, first echelon work was like driver maintenance. Second and third echelon was, like motor pool maintenance, and then fourth and fifth usually went to like a maintenance battalion kind of stuff.
I think there is such an opportunity there for us to get better as shops in simply understanding the language of vets, right? And I think that's something that I struggled with. I put out a shop talk video about a week ago talking about one of my learning lessons when I first had a really good employee that came. He was an Army vet, and he had been in combat, right? He had seen some stuff, and so for me, one of the hardest parts was the communication side and understanding and really putting myself in his shoes. And in a lot of cases, it was still him speaking that military language, right? And for me, it was really hard to follow him until we actually sat down and had a conversation one day where I'm like, hey, can you explain this in a little bit more detail to me? Because I don't know if I follow you here. Scott, do you see any room for improvement in terms of how we communicate with vets that are on our teams?
Yeah, again, like Jim was talking earlier about the path. So, I'll give you an example. When you take an 18-year-old raw young person and you put them in a program, it was like for me, for example, I went to 3 years of school before I even got to the submarine, and the school was 11 hours a day, 5 days a week. And if you wanted to pass that class, you had to study for 3 or 4 hours every night when you got home or you got set back. So I guess what I'm getting at is once, the class I went to was designed by MIT for repairing nuclear weapons. And once you complete that, when you get there, you really don't know anything. You've never really worked on, the real thing. And so the first thing they did is they gave you a qualification card. And the qualification card had probably 150 practical factors, right? Where once you learn that practical factor, then a seasoned submariner can sign your card that you are qualified to do that unsupervised, right? So what I started doing when I was interviewing vets is I developed them a similar card related to cars. So it
Interesting.
started out with the basics of lift safety, for example, was in the first column, but then it got up to as advanced as a timing chain replacement or even more. So when they learned, it wasn't go hang out with Billy and then go over there in a couple months and go, how's he doing? You know, is he ready? You know, I mean, this way you just look at his card and you can look and see his progress. And then that's what they were used to in the Navy anyway, to qualify in a certain area. It wasn't just, you know, the responsibility was unfathomable, and the what could happen if you did not follow the rules. You could kill your whole crew, right? So you had to make sure that that person was sufficiently trained. And this card, I was a little concerned about it because I didn't know how, if it would take off, but I didn't expect the senior techs that were already there, the non-trainees or who were doing the training to take it seriously. I had to put a little money involved with them to get them to do it, but they enjoyed it. They enjoyed that training program and the structure.
So when you say training program in the card, was it something where you're checking it off as they get that skill, or is it give me an idea like how that process worked?
Okay, so if you have what I would do is I would pick 3 or 4 technicians in the shop, senior masters, that could sign the card. So when the guy is proficient and he can do, for example, he can do a brake replacement and resurface unsupervised, then he'll get his card signed for that job. And it just, you had to turn in your card every Friday for progress. And if you weren't making progress, you had to dig in and find out why.
That's a really good idea. I like that. I think being able to provide some structure with that, it gives them some visibility to the skills that they're really trying to advance with. And really, I think it gets the others in the shop to buy in as well. I think that's a great program. Roger, do you have any insight or anything that you'd add to that?
No, that's actually a really great idea. You know, we kind of, you know, do the preliminary part of that, just having them shadow with somebody, but not necessarily go as far as having a card that they sign off. They have somebody sign off on. That's new to me.
Is that in your world, Jim? Is that something that's applicable in kind of what you do too?
No, I think so. We've got a technician training program, and then we submit every Friday what they've learned. We've also got what we refer to as a technician's matrix, where it's basically the trucking industry uses a system called VMRS, which is a coding system. So air conditioning is 001, cabin sheet metal 002, and on and on. And so we'll look at, when we're talking to a technician, kind of determine, hey, you know, what out of these, what can you do? What do you know how to do? What have you had experience with? And that, again, kind of helps us to figure out whether that technician is an A level, B level, C level, or entry level, which is in our world is a D level.
So that's a pretty fair amount of structure there then, right? When somebody comes in, you've got a pretty good program laid out for them.
No, I think so. I mean, you know, again, you're trying to, you can't determine where you need to take them until you can kind of determine where they are and what their current skill level is.
Sure. Yeah, just like anybody, right? If you don't know what their base level of skill is, it's really hard to build off of that. So having that, and I think you guys are lucky in the fact that you understand what a vet's background might have looked like and how that experience will translate. I think that's one thing that I will continue to struggle with, is trying to understand that in a little bit more detail. But I think that gives you as managers with that military background a pretty huge advantage when it comes to recruiting military vets for your shops, right? Because you know how to speak their lingo, you know how to talk to them, you know how to lead them, probably in a better fashion than I could as just a civilian manager. I've got to imagine, Roger, that's an advantage.
Absolutely. I can tell you, not having that background myself, it makes it a lot harder for me to understand when they're trying to explain different things to me. It's something I had to learn the hard way, getting involved with hiring veterans, how structured and what their expectation was, and why they were getting stressed when that structure wasn't there. It's something that it took me a while to learn.
So I'm not alone in that regard,
Yeah.
where it took, I think it's easy to talk about, but until you're in those shoes of that manager that doesn't have a military background, it's different.
Absolutely.
Well, and I think the other thing that veterans are used to training. And that's a critical piece, especially at a dealership level. The trucks that we're working on today don't look anything like the trucks we worked on 20 years ago. Cars, bulldozers, whatever motorized equipment, mechanical equipment you're talking about. And so, I've got to have the best Mac dealer, the best Mac technicians in town. These two gentlemen here have got to have, their guys have to be top of the line, because if you're a dealer, there is nowhere else to go. And so you've got to have guys that are committed to doing their training. And again, veterans already kind of have some of that, because if you are a member of the military, you're training all the time, whether you're an infantryman or whether you're a motorized technician or a tanker, artillery, whatever it is, you spend a lot of your day training. So I think as important as the training piece is for the employer, it's equally important for the new employee, and that's on an ongoing basis, whether they've been there 2 months or 20 years.
That's a great point. That training side is incredibly important, and I think it's incredibly important for technicians as a whole, right? Whether they're veterans or not, but even more so if they're a veteran. That's something that they're going to crave, is looking for that. So we've talked about the importance of veterans and touched on the communication side. I think we could do a whole day talking about the communication side, because I could barrage you with questions about about the communication thing, because it's something that I continue to learn about. But what I want to talk about here, as we've got roughly 20 minutes left, is how we get in front of technicians, right? Or how we get in front of veterans to come into our shops, and maybe not even just our shops, but maybe you've got that service writer or service advisor or parts person that you're trying to fill with a veteran. I want to talk to you guys about visibility and how we get out in front of military vets so that they know that we have a really good opportunity for them, that we're veteran friendly, and that when they come, that they're going to feel comfortable about that. So Scott, I want to start with you on that, in talking about how you get in front of veterans, how you recruit veterans. Do you have any advice for those that are out there listening as to how you get out in front of them?
Well, the biggest thing is, get to know every city. In every city, most cities have bases, right? And on every base, there's a transition officer, or a person who is responsible for getting that veteran out of uniform and into the civilian world. So it's very simple just to really just, look up on the computer, type in a base near where you live, and then find that name and then send them an email or call them. I called last week. I found Naval, since we're in Jacksonville, I found Naval Air Station Jax the personnel director over there. He answered the phone on the first ring, and he was happy to hear from me. And he was saying that, you know, right now there's still kind of some tough rules with the pandemic to meet face to face to get on base, but he said that should be relaxing. So that would be the first thing that I would go for. Secondly, there are career fairs all the time for veterans now in most major cities. You know, you can go set up your booth there and talk to them and let them know what you can give them as a career. You know, those are the two major things that I think that, you know, help me the most anyway.
Well, and I think the things that you just mentioned aren't things that take a ton of time, right? We talk to shops every day that are battling the clock and trying to put out all the fires, and oftentimes recruiting ends up being on the back burner, right? And the couple things that you just alluded to there shouldn't take a ton of time. Being able to reach out to that advisor at the base, like just actually being able to have a conversation and letting them know who you are, and hopefully that the conversation leads to more of a relationship to where you actually know who that person is, and then you know when a career fair is coming up, or I don't know. To me, there's just so many opportunities when you start to open that box and when you start to really be able to engage with them. Roger, in the Chicago area, do you guys have you seen any of that? Kind of what Scott's talking about?
Absolutely. There are definitely, job fairs, with veterans and things like that. I have a little bit of an advantage too, because our General Motors has a program called Shift the Gears that you can register for. And then when a veteran is finishing up their terms, that they can do the GM training and come out of that program almost fully certified through GM. And then dealerships could sponsor that training and then hire them and have them on for 6 months without any punishment or anything if it doesn't work out, on the ground level once they do join the team. So, we have a couple of guys that we brought on through that program. And that, attending the job fairs, whether it be, college, veteran, high school, the vocational schools, word of mouth too. That goes, we hired, 2 veterans that are at our Mazda store that are still in active duty, and they're just, they're still completing their training. And they were referred to us by someone I met at a local vocational school. So, it just really, like Scott says, just getting out there, putting in that little effort to be consistent and be visual with everybody.
How much does word of mouth matter with veterans? I know with technicians, we see it a lot where they chat back and forth and they know which dealerships or which shops are good places to work, and they know which ones may have a bad reputation, or maybe they're not taking care of their veteran employees. Roger, do you hear, is word of mouth a thing with vets in being able to understand where a good place to go work is?
Absolutely. Word of mouth is how, most of us get a lot of information. And, there's a term that I've heard in this business that the business is very big, but also very small. So, there's always people talking, and the reputation you develop, the culture you have at your store, it goes way further than anything we could be posting on any social media or, commercials or anything like that. So it is a very big deal to make sure, that you're mindful about that.
Good. And John Hitch actually just put a comment in the chat with a link employers can use to find the career fairs. Thank you, John, for putting that out there. That's hopefully a great resource for everybody. Jim, you and I had talked about this a couple of weeks ago about how, trying to brainstorm and figure out how we get out in front of technicians in front of veterans to bring them into your shop. Is what Scott's saying there, you and I kind of had that similar conversation of needing to prioritize making a call and trying to get out in front of a base. Does that kind of resonate with what you were talking about?
I would say so. I mean, we've got a full-time recruiter now. But at the same time, we're trying to drill down a little farther to where, how do we get in front of the technician other than at job fairs. Sometimes job fairs can be successful, sometimes they can't be. But we're trying to get to where, just thinking of my own thing, I was with a transportation battalion. Everybody there was either a mechanic or a truck driver. We're trying to get to that level, or a maintenance battalion or a maintenance platoon where everybody in that platoon are technicians, and they may not be looking for a job today, but it's an opportunity to plant a seed to say, hey, a year from now, when you get out, you might want to come to work for us. And, one of the things that we've become a very transient society. So the idea that everybody gets out of the military and they go back home isn't necessarily the case. And, sometimes, depending on an individual's circumstances, they may not want to go home. And so, they may be in a situation where they do want to move to Florida, or they do want to move to Tennessee, or, hey, they'd like to take a look at what Texas looks like, or they may decide that where their base is, they really like it there. And, they may want to stay right there. So, I think there's an understanding or there needs to be an understanding that we are a transient society today, and people are willing to move and relocate for the right opportunities.
Scott, I can't imagine you'd take advantage of that in Florida, would you? I do think he hits right on the head, though. There's an excellent opportunity for relocation candidates, and it might not always even necessarily be warm climate. Maybe there's you see a lot of people migrating to Montana, for instance. I think there's just being out there and having visibility, I think is important, but I can't help but think to Florida, trying to get somebody to relocate there right now is probably not the hardest thing in the world, is it?
No, the weather's beautiful. Beaches are beautiful. So there's a lot to offer here.
And John Hitch, actually, again, John, great comment. One issue that for turning vets into techs is that the GI Bill is not always available for a 6 or 9 month auto diesel school. Something the VA and industry need to work together on. Have you guys experienced something similar? I'm guessing he's referring to maybe like a UTI's, a course that might not go a full 2 years. I kind of vaguely remember that the GI Bill didn't cover that, but have you guys seen anything similar?
I can't say that.
No, the GI Bill has changed over the years. It was like when I was in, I paid $1,200, $50 a check for a year or whatever it was, and then you could pretty much go to anything you want. But to be honest, I'm not too familiar with how that works at this point. I know I don't think they've really tightened things down, but they have specific schools and things that they work with.
Question, and I'll open this up to the table. Who can best explain the GI Bill as a whole? And Jim, I don't know if you've got any recent insight into the GI Bill, but any I guess familiarity with it or ability to explain to the general public what that's all about?
Well, I think a lot of it depends on when you served, because I got out right at the end of Vietnam. I missed the old GI Bill by 4 months. So a guy that went in 5 months earlier than me had a whole different GI Bill than I had. To really put a handle on it, you really have to understand when the person served, because it changes year to year. It changes administration to administration. So it's kind of hard to put your finger on it, because again, a lot of it is dependent upon when the individual served in the military.
I honestly didn't know it was that fluid. What you're just telling me now, I kind of assumed it was always the same, and that's a shame on me for not knowing that. But I honestly did not know it was that fluid.
Well, like when I was in, I joined. There was a program. So for every dollar I invested, the government invested $2. So when I got out of the Marine Corps, I had $8,100 in educational benefits. But somebody that went in during Vietnam could have went for 4 years, and the GI Bill would have paid for all of it. So again, depends on when you served.
How we had talked about transition back in general, but what you just said kind of triggered something with me. How does a veteran accumulate money when they're in the service? Like, how are they paid? How does that work? And the reason I ask that question is trying to understand as we're transitioning them back into civilian life, how does their bank account look when they're coming back to work for us? And I'll open this up. I know that's a really vague question, but it is one that I really haven't even really wondered in the past, and I wish I would have, because I think it's worthy of the question of, are they coming back with some cash, or are they coming back with nothing?
I think it really depends. When I got out, Clinton downsized all the bases and he paid people to leave. So I got a check for 160 grand not to be in.
Wow.
But to answer your question, that's kind of rare. It really just depends on overmanned jobs. And, the biggest thing is, or like you were saying, that they don't pay very well. Okay. Really, it's kind of almost embarrassing what we pay an active service member. The only advantage that they get is that their housing is taken care of, their food, medical. Even now, medical is, I think that they have to participate in some way for different types of benefits. When if I went to sea for 4 months, though, they would pay me in advance so I could pay my bills. And then as a 21-year-old kid, I'd come back, I'd have $5,000, which was a lot of money, for a 21-year-old kid. But yeah, it's just, they pay on the 1st and the 15th of every month. I believe that's still the case. Uniform allowance like once a year, things like that. Other than that, the pay scales are really, really light, but you do have to factor in the housing allowances and the benefits that they get on top of that when you transition out, it's a little different to get used to that, especially like, taxes and stuff, a lot of the money they get for housing allowance and we call it comrades, was money for food, it's tax free. So you didn't have to pay any taxes on that. You would just have to basically pay taxes on your regular monthly income.
That's interesting. And Roger, I don't know if you found that insightful, but for me, just hearing that, it's a question that I didn't know I needed to ask, right? I didn't know I needed to know that, but in thinking back about it, it does help me understand that transition a little bit more of what they're paying for, maybe what they're getting paid. I see Carl Barnard just put a comment with the military pay. So that's another fascinating resource. Thanks for doing that, Carl. But Roger, learn anything there?
Absolutely. I had no idea they could pay you to no longer be in the military if they were downside. I did not expect that.
And again, that depends. When I got out, I had $1,000 to my name. I was making $751 a month.
So you think about that and say a young Jim is coming back and you're trying to get that young individual into your shop who doesn't have tools, doesn't have a lot of excess cash, has to find housing, has to line up all of these things in order to come and work for you. I don't think we put ourselves in their shoes enough, right? Because that's got to be a terrifying thing, Jim. And I don't know when you were coming back to civilian life, if that was something that was intimidating or you just looked at it as another challenge. But coming back with $1,000 and trying to start your life and especially in this industry, had to look a little, I don't know, a little scary.
Well, I mean, when I got out, and was in college a month later. And so I was working full time and going to college full time. And so I was fortunate. I was able to live home for a little bit. My dad passed away 6 months after I got out of the Marine Corps. And so, I was 100% on my own. My mother was not able to help me with college whatsoever. So yeah, it was a challenge certainly, but I think some of the things you learn in the military is, every day is a challenge, and so you either embrace it or you fail.
Well, I think that, if nothing else, those that are listening on the roundtable today, if you can take that back and say, you kind of put these pieces together, right? You make the call to the base, you go talk to that person, and maybe you're doing a career fair, and hopefully what we've talked about will give you some insight into what questions to ask when you are sitting across the table from that veteran that you want to put yourself in their shoes, understand their situation. And I'm guessing every single situation is unique, but understand that there's some challenges, right? It's not going to just be a simple, hey, come work for me. They might have to find housing. They might have to figure out how to get a new bank, how to basically function. And there's a lot of stuff there. I mean, when we look at this and as we're talking, it's going through my head and I'm like, man, I could have done a better job at this. Like that, there is some opportunity there to get better, right, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, the veteran will figure it out. But again, that's why you got to have a decent wage to provide them. It would almost be a slap in the face to offer them $13 an hour and say you're going to go change oil. I don't think that too many of them would accept it, number one. And then even if they did, it would be a for now thing and you wouldn't be able to retain them.
Yeah, it's got to be a livable wage, right? Like they're coming back to start their lives, and if you're not giving them a livable wage, it's not going to be long term. It's not going to work out well. So great advice, guys. I think we've got a few questions here. I know we're bumping up on the hour here shortly. The time goes fast, doesn't it? It goes really fast. But 3 questions. I'll start with John Sylvester asking, are there veteran programs that can also provide loans for employment assistant items like tools? Have you guys seen anything like that?
I didn't hear that question. Say it again.
So, are there veteran programs that can also provide loans for employee assistant items like tools?
One of the guys that I hired, there was a grant that he got that he was going into the vocational field. I had to write him a letter that we were hiring him in what industry. And with that, he got $900 towards tool purchases that he could do. And that was through the same program that he was coming out of the military from.
That's great.
And there's a lot of state programs too that participate in helping veterans transition. So there's many different things that they can research there as well.
Yeah, and just for you guys to keep an eye out, we actually are working with a partner of ours to basically make it easier for an employer to give a loan to a technician in order to get tools. So, and a variety of other things, but something to keep an eye out for on the Wrenchway side. We are working on a program that helps with that type of assistance if the shop is willing to do it. Got another question. I've heard some managers, owners state they don't hire vets. Obviously, this is terrible. What message would you tell those managers to open their mind or educate them on it? And Scott, I don't know if you want to start with that one.
I've never really seen that. I don't think anybody would tell me that face to face, because I am one. I'm sure there are people out there that would feel that way. Sometimes I think that the label is that it was a person that wasn't didn't do well enough in school to maybe go to college, or he was maybe a troublemaker, and then joined the military to try to straighten his life out. But I would hope that wouldn't be a practice that happens. I hope that would be few and far between. It would be disappointing if I met somebody that thought that.
Jim, I don't know if you've ever heard it, but I've unfortunately heard it, and it blows me away that anybody would ever think that way. But not sure if you would have any advice for that.
Well, I mean, our
way.
company on any given day is 16 to 18% veteran. So if they don't want to hire them, they can just send them to me.
That's good advice. When I look at that, what I see is maybe a weak leader, right? Somebody that doesn't want to lead the veterans coming back. If you're thinking in that mindset, I would maybe challenge you and your leadership style, and maybe, hopefully not being intimidated by them, but being able to actually lead them and understand that you've got to maybe adapt your management style a little bit. So I don't know. That's a frustrating one to get. I know that. Last question: with family time and getting the opportunity to be with their families more consistent post-service, how do you recommend including their families in the hiring process, making their family feel that this is the right move for them as well? And I think that's a great question. Roger, I'll start with you there.
Invite them to an interview, have them sit in, and I actually ran into the situation. The person I was interviewing told me that his family was outside. I told him to come on in, and we had the interview in our waiting area. He has 2 kids in there, and they're, hanging out, and his wife, and she's asking questions. She could see what the drive was to the store, what that was going to be like. And, they were new to the area, so I was telling them about different places in the area, and then they get a better mindset of who their significant other is going to work with. And if you are, the right candidate for them, then it won't be a very, hard thing to do. It's just have them all, give them a tour of the store, while you're trying to hire this person.
What a cool story. I'm so happy to hear that you brought the whole family in and had that talk with them. Scott, anything you'd add there?
Yeah, so the difference with, somebody that you would get out of a technical program or something like that is a lot of these veterans have already started families. And most of the people that are coming out of the tech programs, and again, I'm sure there may be some, but the majority have not started a family. So you have to include them. Of course, the deployments are very hard on the spouse who has to stay home and take care of everything. So you got to maybe do a little research for them and talk about the schools in the area or whatever to try to get them to want to commit to you. I spent 4 years submerged, so that's a long time, and I would go out 4 months with no contact, no email, no anything other than like a quick, we got 8 family grams, which were 20 words or less. I had 2 grandmothers that died, and I didn't even know it till I got back. So, it's actually a fresh start for the families, I think. I wasn't married or anything at the time, but I think it's a welcoming, fresh start that your husband or your wife is going to be home, every night.
And you set the tone. I mean, in that conversation with the family right off the bat, incredible story about your 2 grandmothers too. That's insane. That's really crazy. Jim, I'll let you end it here.
I think that we've certainly had situations where, somebody is looking to move to our area And so they'll come down for the weekend, and, you know, we'll usually put them up for a night at a hotel. You know, give them like a food voucher to go to something like that. But I think it's important you understand that the family dynamic, you know, where are they coming from? You know, really, I try to focus in a lot of times on the wife and where she's from. Because, you know, to your point, you know, if they're out of the service, they're 22, 23 years old, they're relatively young people. You know, the wife may or may not have been away from home very much. So understanding that dynamic, if they've got kids, where do the grandparents live? It always helps to have an understanding of what their family dynamic looks like, because, you know, the guy might be a superstar, but you might find in 3 months he's gone because family issues, or, hey, mama wants to move back home, or whatever the case is. So I think it's important to understand the family dynamic.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I want to end this by just saying, you know, thank you to all the veterans that are out there for the service that you've done. And, you know, I hope that we're making this industry a better place and a more welcoming place for you to want to come and work in these shops, because there's a lot of really good veteran friendly shops that are out there. And I think it really aligns with your skill sets. And, you know, this week being, you know, Friday's Veterans Day, one of our big asks of our clients on the Wrenchway side is get out there, take pictures of the veterans in your shops, get them out and get them visible, because I think what they've done for our country is you can't pay that back, right? So a small piece of gratitude from the shop's end and snapping a photo. Somebody just put one out on Shop Talk earlier this week with the whole group picture of the veterans in their shop, and the power and impact that has to not only the team that you've already got, but maybe speaking to that veteran that is sitting out there on the sidelines looking for their next move, and they see that, hey, there's a whole team of veterans out there that are already, you know, they already speak my language. They make me feel like I'm at home. I think there's a lot of impact in that. So happy Veterans Day. Thank you to all the veterans that are out there. And then thank the three of you for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I learned a ton during the course of this, as I will continue to do. But thank you guys.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.